Facing fear is a fundamental aspect of life, from battling lifelong phobias to dealing with the constant stress of adulthood and the various responsibilities which plague us in later life. But being scared as a child is very different. As with most things related to childhood, fear is simple. While an adult might be haunted by ghosts of their past, a child has not yet adopted such demons. Childhood fears are fueled by the fantastic, monstrous images found in the pages of brightly coloured picture books, or those which flicker past their eyes at 24 frames a second. And whether it be scrawled on paper or projected onto a screen, the most terrifying of all child-friendly material is that of the fairy tale. The work of Hans Christian Andersen and the Brothers Grimm have terrorised people of all ages, but scar kids to the point of recurring nightmare. And here's the thing, despite their tearful screams, children like being scared. Moreover, it's imperative that they are. The horror in Andersen's work is brilliant, because it rises above the primary function of creating formidable villains. It illustrates the cruelty of life. By educating children of the existence of unhappy endings, it aids in their comprehension of grief, depression, and unfairness. Dark stories of evil triumphing over the righteous unsettle and disturb kids because it conflicts with what their age-appropriate entertainment normally tells them. That if you are gentle and kind-hearted, you will succeed in life both personally and socially. But this is not always true. Sometimes life likes to kick you when you're down, and throws all sorts of unpleasantries at your face, and that can result in a volatile person prone to aggressive reaction when things don't go their way. And this is an aspect of fairy tales which has been stamped out over the years, particularly when it comes to Disney's retellings. In the beginning, things were different. Snow White is heralded as one of the most traumatizing movies of all time, a title earned by the villain's bone-chilling transformation from beautiful queen to wretched hag. It's horrifying, but Disney's work has arguably never reached such terrifying heights since, and that is due to the fact that children's cinema has become sugar-coated. The grim tale of Cinderella is a twisted fable that was adapted for the screen in a whimsical form, stripped of all its darkness and bloodshed. Imagine a world where the Magic Castle logo precedes an animated feature which shows the ugly stepsisters hacking pieces of their feet off in order to squeeze into the glass slipper when the prince comes knocking. With the exception of a few recent offerings which will be discussed later in this video, children's entertainment is bright, happy, and free from anything scary enough to elicit a scream, let alone a burst of tears. So I want to discuss what scared us as kids, and why we're grateful to have been so frightened. You alright now? You ready to go?
Thanks for inviting me.
You're grand. I didn't invite you, you just kind of showed up, but sure, listen. So, I just kind of wanted to talk about the things that scared us as kids, and that what that fear kind of did for us growing up.
Okay.
You know? So I kind of wanted to use it as like a framework. In the book they're afraid of things like the Wolfman or the Mummy, what we would deem now to be cartoonish characters. Mm-hmm. So they don't scare kids anymore, so they had to change it up. Originally it was those very simple things that scared them as kids.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I want to talk about for the first half, because when we get into, you know, It Chapter 2 and the second half of the book, when they're adults, Pennywise takes very different forms, and he then starts to prey on their adult fears. Okay, so we'll start off with cartoons. My favourite cartoon of all time is Courage the Cowardly Dog. You know, Courage the Cowardly Dog was always scary, but it seems to be more disturbing now.
Those things that like you never really noticed when you were a kid.
Yeah. It's one of those weird things that when you're a kid, you don't care, you just like to watch it. But when you're older, you're almost like, kids shouldn't be watching that kind of thing. But you have to remember that it didn't really faze you that much when you were that old.
No.
But the one cartoon that always scared me and my friends the most, the one we always remembered as being the scariest, was Ramsay's Curse. I don't know why this one was so scary. I think it was the fact that it used like mixed forms of animation, that it goes from hand-drawn animation to the CGI rendering of Ramses, and that's always kind of
because he moves in such an unusual way.
There's always something very freaky about a sudden shift in medium. Courage did that again. I think it's called Courage in the Big Stinking City or something like that.
Yeah, I think I remember that one.
And Eustace and Muriel are being holed up in some place, and Courage has to go get something. And he shows up outside this like apartment block, and he has to move up through the floors, and he opens a door on each one. And
Oh yeah, I
you know,
remember that one.
it does that
Is
classic.
this one with the girl?
Yeah, like it does that classic gag where he, like, you know, he'll open the door and you'll see all like the sharks or something like that, and then
Yeah.
he closes it again, and you know, like that wasn't too bad. But there's one moment where he opens a door and you can tell instantly that it's shifted to like a claymation stop motion style. It's this girl, you see her from the back playing the violin, and it's the freakiest shit.
Is this when she turns
Ever.
around and makes a face?
She like spins around, her hair
Yeah.
goes all crazy.
Yeah. Now, when I was younger though, I actually don't get scared of anything.
No, you don't.
I was the exact same. I was the exact same as like now.
Like when we watch horror films now, I'm the one that jumps. Even if the film's not particularly scary, I just jump at things.
Yeah.
Like when we went to see Happy Death Day. That's more of a comedy than it
Yeah.
is a horror film.
Yeah.
But what bit did I jump at?
It was like when he first appears, like because the music goes up so loud.
Yeah, he like hops out somewhere.
Yeah.
And no, just do a hoop. But you never do. You just sit there like completely stone faced.
No.
Which is always when you do react to something.
You know, it was
That's
scary.
when I'm like, oh shit, this is getting good.
Yeah.
Because you never ever do.
No.
One of the only times that you've ever reacted to something that you're just like, Pat, what's that? 2 times I can think of. When we saw Krampus
Oh yeah.
and that Jack in the Box
Oh, fuck.
dude comes
That
out and his
caterpillar,
mouth
he looks like a
like
caterpillar.
splits open.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. So there was that, and then there's the bit in John Carpenter's The Thing where the head rips off the
Yeah.
body and then it like sprouts like spidery crab legs.
Yeah, stuff like that scare me.
But that in particular was like a what the fuck moment,
That-
because that's
fucking
just
love that
this
movie.
amazing sequence that just keeps on going and going and going and getting more impressive technically as it
Yeah.
goes on. Yeah, I'm the one that always gets scared.
Mm.
So that scared you as a kid, that Ramses.
Again, it's really
No.
hard because I don't get scared by stuff like that. I loved Courage. I think Courage is still
Mm.
one of my favourite cartoons. I would still watch Courage today. Yeah, I never really like freak out when I watch them. I'm
No,
trying
that-
to think which one. I think one that did creep me out was the one with the cat. When the cat comes to stay. He's like really, really tall and
Yeah, I know, where they bring in like he has like the theme song.
Welcome to the Cat's Motel. I'm Katz.
That
Yeah.
comes out. I'll put it up in the video. It's like,
yeah.
that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's got like a funky song.
It's a
He's
great
not scary.
episode. No, he like locks his room at night and stuff like that, and you don't it's like something weird is going on. I think the idea of things that I don't actually know what's happening creeps me out more.
Yeah.
Like what scared me when I was a kid. So like I know your view on the Blair Witch Project. I watched that when I was like 8 or 9
Yeah.
because we had it on DVD, and it was more the reason why I wanted to watch it was because my dad started explaining how scared people got in the cinema and how basically how they marketed the whole video or how they marketed the whole movie. And I think it was the idea of the actual urban legend that scared me more.
Right.
I think it's the idea of things. It's like I like the whole thing with Eliza Lamb, the girl who like was found in the water tank. Like it's the idea of things.
Yeah, well, I suppose that's what scares me more now, but when I was younger, it was more like, you know, the visceral aspect of the cartoons. It was
Yeah.
the images that it showed. But what's interesting about it is when I went back to watch Courage the Cowardly Dog, there's nothing scary about King Ramses. It's actually just kind of funny. The scariest episode in Courage is Freaky Fred.
Oh, like yeah, he's fucking creepy.
Yeah, like I mean,
Like he's so weird.
I could do a video on Freaky Fred alone. Like when he gets locked in that bathroom and he with Fred and he's like scraping on the door to get out, and then all you just hear is courage, and he turns around. That shit is scary. And the thing about Cartoon Network, and all of its other shows, was that cartoons used to be harder edged. I know nowadays they can kind of like tap into the whole like stonery kind of side of things, and that's how adults like them, like Adventure Time or SpongeBob or something like that. But back in the day when, you know, Cartoon Network was playing Courage the Cowardly Dog, Dexter's Lab, Ed, Edd and Eddy, all that kind of things, they would get certain episodes that came along that were like horror themed.
Yeah, you always had them. Even because you didn't watch Nickelodeon.
No.
I grew up with Nickelodeon. They always had like, I loved their Halloween specials, and they were like
Yeah.
they were always really creepy.
But sometimes they weren't even Halloween special ones. Like the interesting thing about Cartoon Network is that as I grew up, they were introducing me to actual horror movies, even though I hadn't realised it yet. By the time I got older, I was already aware that these more terrifying movies existed. Like, for example, there's an episode of Dexter's Lab where it's Mother's Day, and their kind of gift to their mom is that she's not going to do any housework.
Oh, I remember.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember.
And it's like a parody of Psycho,
Yeah.
where she goes crazy.
Yeah.
And it's really freaky.
Yeah.
It's kind of freaky. So you've got a show that, you know, references Psycho. I mean, Courage the Cowardly Dog referenced everything, right up to The Exorcist,
Yeah.
in the Demon Mattress, that episode. You get another show like Johnny Bravo. There's an episode where he goes on a plane and he looks out onto the wing and
it
there's a
references
clown.
Twilight Zone.
And it's the Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
So I already knew these kinds of things before I found out what they were actually referencing. And that's why I'm always surprised when people say, I've never heard of Freddy Krueger, or I've never heard of Jason, because when I was younger, before I ever saw these movies, I just knew what they were.
So did I. Even because The Simpsons with the Treehouse of Horrors, they referenced everything.
Yeah.
And when, like, you're so young, you don't know what the movie is, but at the same time, when you go back and watch all of them, you're like, holy shit, The Simpsons did it.
Yeah.
So,
Simpsons did it.
Simpsons did it.
It's only because you see and hear so many references throughout pop culture anyway, that
Yeah.
it's almost impossible not to question, what's that from? So it was interesting how Cartoon Network, a show that was aimed at kids, and I know Courage is particularly horror themed, but everything else, you know, it touched upon areas of cinema that you wouldn't really be introduced to until later on, which leads us into movies that we did begin to see as we got older that were actually scary. You're afraid of really, really odd things.
Me?
When you're younger. No,
Oh, me.
everyone. Like, when I'm gonna start listing off all the things now that scared me, and it's just weird. I'm almost disappointed in my own list, because it's like, you know, I'd love to say something like the first time I saw her head turn around in The Exorcist, but I had seen that referenced so many times before I actually saw The Exorcist that I wasn't scared by it at all. As soon as it started, I was waiting for the head to twist around. So, like, that element of surprise was gone, so you don't really freak out because that's what you signed up for.
Yeah.
You know? I think you're most afraid by things when you're not expecting it to be scary. And certain really weird things that I, for some reason, just fixated on as being really scary was the Twister in The Wizard of Oz. I remember seeing that, maybe it was like because it was black and white, you see this, you know, jet black, thing, like, just tear apart the horizon, and it always looked like it was getting closer and closer and closer. Obviously now we know it's just back projection, but I remember that always freaked me out.
Yeah, it's like Impending Doom.
Yeah.
Like, you know it's going, because you know devastation that Twister can do.
And you can't outrun it.
Yeah.
You know, you're...
It's gonna happen.
Yeah, and you can't stop it.
Yeah.
So that always kind of freaked me out. Was there any, like, certain particular things that aren't really scary, but just kind of scared you when you were a kid? You're just impenetrable, aren't you?
I just don't get scared. You shouldn't have me on.
No, you're a brilliant co-host.
Let me think.
We're moving on.
What?
Like, in addition to, like, the Twister, things that, like, shouldn't really be scary, certain pieces of music can often, like, freak people out. And the one for me that always scared me was the X-Files theme song.
That is very creepy.
It is, but I remember, like, when I was a kid, I'd be lying in bed and I could hear, like, my mum and dad would put it on, and I could hear the music, you know, like, coming up through the floor, and I remember going down and saying, like, you know, turn it off, but I'd be saying, like, for them not to watch it. That kind of thing is like, I told you not to watch that show. But
You're so cute. I'm trying to think about music. Yeah, music. There was one song that used to creep me out. And it was Michael Jackson's Little Susie. Like, what the fuck? That's a creepy song. At the start of the song, you have her winding up the box, like the musical box, and then you have her humming, and then all of a sudden, like, she's falling down the stairs. That is horrible. That's a horrible song. And my dad, like, I'm gonna make him watch this part. My dad would play that song for me and my brother, and like, I wasn't really that scared of it. As I got older, I was kind of like, oh, whatever. But Wesley hated it. Like, it was, but like, it's, yeah, like, Now talking about games, and you have Tomb Raider there.
Yeah.
So Tomb Raider 3 with the line.
No, the bit in Tomb Raider, I think it's Tomb Raider 3 where she's in China and you go into like this section of cave and this fucking tiger is like sprinting around after you. I remember that was the scariest fucking thing. And I played it, or I didn't play it, but I saw it on YouTube recently and I was like, it looks terrible.
Mine was, whenever I'd be watching Wesley play it, it would be, I don't know whether it's Tomb Raider 1 or 2, I feel like it's 1. Or no, I feel like it's 2, I'm not entirely sure.
What happens?
I think it's at the very start of the game where she like, it's like one of your first missions anyway, and you're like, you jump down and a boulder starts like coming after you.
Mm.
I hated it. 'Cause I hate the idea of being chased.
But see, that's what I don't understand about you saying that you're not scared by games. Because the scariest part of horror games for me is like, you know, I can watch any horror film that you show me, but I can't stand horror games.
Oh my
like,
god,
like
he
the
is
first,
like a little bitch.
no, the
Comes to
first
games.
Outlast was the most distressing experience of my life. I hated every second of it.
I know you did.
Because what I don't like is seeing something down the end of a corridor or whatever, and it starts to chase you, and then you, if it's in the first person, you have to turn around, so you can't see it anymore. And I don't know how far of a distance there is between me and the thing that's going to butcher me. I don't like that. That freaks me out. And that's why I don't understand why you just sit there and criticize me being afraid.
You get so frightened though. You get to a point though where you just like scream and like curse at the screen. It's like, it's not that bad. You go overboard.
I don't. It's scary.
But you go overboard. You're like...
Alright, look, we'll leave it at that.
Go check the camera. Oh.
Thanks for headbutting me in the fucking nose. Jesus Christ, would you just sit down? Okay, this is gonna annoy you. Here's something that everyone says when you sit down to watch a movie, or they used to before they changed it to Wide Eye Media.
Oh, the Carlton logo.
The Carlton branding logo that popped up in front of every movie that you went to see. When that would come on, you'd be sitting there, and then the person next to you would go, "That used to scare me when I was a kid." To the point where when I'd go to the cinema, I would be purposefully listening out because there would be someone around you who was gonna fucking say it.
Yeah.
When that came on, it was
I
like,
remember
you know,
I
I
would
used to
be
be scared
going-
of that, you know. You're like, yeah, so was fucking everyone
I
and their
remember my
granny.
friend was like, oh, I started screaming so much my mum had to come out, like bring me out of the screen. It's like,
No.
can I get a drink?
So one last thing that, you know, is a legitimate horror film, so it's okay that I was freaked out by it, was when I was, I would say about 7 or 8, my dad put on Mimic, you know, the Guillermo del Toro movie, because I loved monster movies for as long as I can remember. I just loved monster movies, and this one was about like a giant insect monster thing that like dress up as a dude in a trench coat. So it was like, you know, right up my alley, but that movie was so odd. It was just so odd, and I remember it got to the point where these two kids go down into the subway because they're like, you know, trying to look for this thing or whatever, they're taking pictures or something like that. And the monster thing, but you haven't really seen it properly yet, it's still like shrouded in darkness, starts walking towards them. And I remember one of the kid, like, he's like backing away, and then he trips over something and lands in loads of barbed wire. And the barbed wire like wrapped around his legs and he couldn't get it off. And I remember him screaming, and I just got this horrible, sick feeling in my stomach.
Was it because he couldn't get away?
I don't know what it was, like I just hated it. And then I remember having to say to my dad, "Can we turn it off?"
Really?
It was one of the only
That's
movies,
not like you.
one of the only movies I've ever turned off, and because I couldn't watch it. And then I remember years later, when I was 13, there was a VHS copy of it lying around. So I was like, no, I'm going to give it another watch, and I'll be able to watch it this time. And I made it past that bit, but again, I got like I'd say another 20 to 30 minutes past that part, and I got that sick feeling in my stomach again, and I just turned it off. I've never gotten to the end of that movie.
I used to get that while making Scooby-Doo's. There was always a colour combination I just couldn't do. I gonna get sick. Like, it'd be blue and green, and I'd be doing it, and I'd have to, like, pull it away. I couldn't do it.
And I mean, like, that's it. That's pretty much it. Like, those are the things that kind of, like, stay burned in my memory. But again, like, I'm kind of disappointed in my own list because there's no, like, you know, iconic horror moment that the first time I saw it, I was just, like, you know, stricken with fear. Like, the ones that I picked are really odd. And they're not particularly scary.
No.
And I can't really explain it.
There was one episode in Taina.
Who?
Taina. In the Nickelodeon show.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, there was one episode where, I don't know why the fuck this was allowed. The kids in the school stayed back to, like, finish off, like, these costumes and props for a play they were doing.
Right.
They were allowed to stay in overnight. That wouldn't fucking happen.
No. What, alone?
Yeah.
Oh, fuck
And
off.
around Halloween. And...
The insurance wouldn't cover that.
No. And they start talking about this, like, old urban legend in the school. And again, I get obsessed with urban legends. I just, like, I get so, like, fixated on them, and I creep myself out. And it was like this headless accordion player, and you actually see him. I remember just looking at it going like, oh shit. Are we breaking up?
Yeah. I said earlier on in the video that Disney has never really gone back to how scary its original adaptations were. And I mean, there are still some kind of like scary things in Disney movies. You know, I think a lot of people were afraid of when Maleficent transforms into the dragon. I always loved dragons when I was a kid, so I was just like, fuck yes! But a lot of people found that kind of scary. And they've never really gone scary again. But they kind of have shown a kind of, you know, a growth and maturity over the past couple of years. In terms of, like, they're moving away from the whole Prince Charming thing.
Yeah.
And they're, you know, they're not talking about princesses that need to be rescued or, you know, like Moana, for example, there's no love interest in that. She's just kind of like, she's the kind of the warrior character, you know.
Yeah.
The only kind of, I suppose, romantic relationship in that movie is between her and the ocean.
Yeah.
And that's it. And then when you get into films like Frozen and then Maleficent, both of those films did the same thing, where it's like, you know, true love's kiss can only break the spell. Only the kind of twist on it is that it wasn't the Prince Charming character this time. It was the sisterly love that was in Frozen, or the mother-daughter love relationship that was seen in Maleficent. And I thought that was quite a clever way to kind of move away from the, you know, the old archetype. It is important to scare kids. You know, it teaches them certain things. And I think when your movies are just happy all the time, you're not really teaching them anything other than this is really nice. But the most mature thing that they've done in years is in Inside Out. What that film does, which I think is so important for kids, is it kind of, at the beginning it's broken up into joy, anger, fear, sadness, envy? Jealousy. All those different characters, and they all each have their own emotions represented in, like, you know, coloured glowing orbs. And it's like you either have a happy memory or an angry memory, split up into different categories. But then, you know, something weird happens where, like, you know, sadness starts to, when she comes into contact with the other orbs, she discolours them. And it's about realising that sometimes life isn't just happy.
Yeah.
It can be sad, and it's okay to feel sad. And you might have certain memories that are happy and sad at the same time. And I think that is one of the most valuable things that you can tell children, is that it's okay to be sad. And that, you know, there are ways of dealing with sadness rather than saying, no, we should reject sadness and just be happy all the time. Which also feeds into, we should reject fear.
Yeah.
And just be happy all the time. And I think just as it's damaging to ignore your negative emotions in terms of being upset or depressed, I also think it's you know, it has a negative effect when you reject things that make you feel uncomfortable or make you feel scared.
Yeah.
You can't do that all the time. Like, if you know the Courage the Cowardly Dog is going to scare your kid, and you can decide, I'm not going to show them that. Like I mentioned before with the you know, the whole thing of like the Carlton logo, how that scared so many kids. You've got no control over whether your child is going to find that scary or not, because it would never have occurred to you that that would be scary. Like when my sister was younger, she was terrified of Mars attacks. But you can obviously wrap your head around why that's freaky. They zap people with their lasers. Well, first of all, they're giant fucking brains. And then, you know, they zap people with their lasers and they turn into skeletons. I know that scared loads of people.
Yeah.
When they were younger, and then you have like, you know, heads being swapped and all this kind of shit. So there's loads of stuff in that would scare a kid. But then you take someone like my brother who doesn't watch horror films at all. He was terrified of the bear on wheels in Teletubbies.
I'm the bear. I'm the bear. With brown fuzzy hair.
You ever see that bear?
I've seen him.
He like wheels in, he's got these big googly eyes. He was scared shitless of that bear.
Yeah.
If they're not even safe watching Teletubbies, I think it's important that you let them experience fear, it, you know, within, you know, a certain capacity, within reason. You know, I'm not saying you should sit down and watch fucking Eraserhead with your toddlers, but, you know, I think it's a good thing that they're not constantly surrounded by things that are nice and things that are happy, because life isn't always, you know, bubbles and cake. Right, so those are the things that, you know, kind of scared us as kids. Anything else you want to add that, you know, scared you? Because I think you've mentioned nothing.
I actually have. For God's sake. I'm never doing this ever again. Don't ask me to do anything anymore.
Alright, get the fuck out of here.